What if the Bible held secrets that had been deliberately hidden for centuries? Secrets about a goddess worshipped alongside Yahweh, whose existence challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient Israelite religion. We've grown up believing in the solitary and all-powerful Yahweh, but what if I told you this wasn't always the case? What if, buried beneath layers of rewritten scripture and centuries of erasure, there was another name, a name of a goddess worshipped alongside Yahweh? That name is Asherah. Revered as the Queen of Heaven and Yahweh's consort, her presence in ancient Israelite religion is no longer mere speculation. Archaeological discoveries like those at Kuntillet Ajrud reveal inscriptions casually mentioning Yahweh and his Asherah, as if their partnership was an accepted truth. This is not a fringe theory. It's evidence from the very fabric of history. These discoveries date back to the 8th century BCE, a time when the Israelite religion was far more complex than the strict monotheism we know today. Inscriptions on pottery, alongside depictions of sacred trees, tell us that Asherah wasn't hidden in the shadows. She was revered openly in temples and homes, her sacred poles standing tall as symbols of fertility and life. Yet, as reform swept through Israel, her name was systematically erased, her story recast as heresy. Why? To uncover this mystery, we must dive into a story of religious transformation, political power, and the deliberate rewriting of faith, a story that was never meant to see the light of day. Before Yahweh's rise to exclusive prominence, Asherah reigned as one of the most significant goddesses in the Canaanite pantheon. Known as Elot, or the Lady of the Sea, she was the consort of El, the chief deity of the Canaanites. Ancient Ugaritic texts describe her as the mother of 70 gods, a creator and nurturer revered for her life-giving powers. Her name was synonymous with abundance, fertility, and wisdom. Sacred trees and poles were her living symbols, reflecting her connection to nature and cosmic balance. For centuries, her presence permeated the religious practices of the region, deeply influencing early Israelite spirituality. When the Israelites emerged from this Canaanite backdrop, they didn't completely abandon Asherah. Instead, they incorporated her into their own developing religious framework. Evidence suggests that Asherah was worshipped alongside Yahweh in a divine partnership. The sacred poles mentioned in the Bible, those repeatedly condemned and destroyed, were symbols of Asherah's presence. Her significance was not limited to rural rituals. She held a place in temple worship, her image standing next to Yahweh's. For centuries, this dual-gendered worship thrived, offering a more balanced vision of divinity. But this balance was eventually deemed a threat to the emerging monotheistic agenda. In 1975, archaeologists unearthed Kuntillet Ajrud, an ancient site in the Sinai desert that would forever change our understanding of early Israelite religion. Among the artifacts were inscriptions on pottery fragments referring to Yahweh and his Asherah. These inscriptions were not cryptic or secretive. They were written in casual, everyday language, suggesting that Asherah's partnership with Yahweh was widely accepted. The site also revealed depictions of sacred symbols, animals, and deities, painting a picture of a religious culture that embraced plurality, not exclusivity. The inscriptions sparked intense debates among scholars and theologians. Was Asherah a deity in her own right, or was the term merely symbolic of a sacred object? While interpretations vary, the archaeological context supports the former. The inclusion of Asherah in blessings and invocations points to her role as a divine figure, revered alongside Yahweh. These findings directly challenge the narrative of strict monotheism presented in later biblical texts. Kuntillet Ajrud is a testament to a time when Israelite religion was fluid, dynamic, and inclusive, a far cry from the rigid structures imposed by later reforms. The Bible repeatedly mentions the destruction of Asherah poles, sacred objects that were integral to her worship. But what exactly were these poles, and why were they so significant? Scholars believe that Asherah poles were either wooden pillars or living trees planted near altars, symbolizing fertility, life, and divine presence. In the ancient world, trees were seen as sacred conduits between heaven and earth, embodying the life-giving qualities of Asherah herself. These poles often stood beside altars to Yahweh, illustrating a partnership that was central to early Israelite worship. The pole wasn't merely a representation, It was believed to channel divine blessings, prosperity, and protection. The presence of these poles in high places and temple courtyards became a target for reformers. The Book of Deuteronomy explicitly commands the Israelites to cut down the Asherah poles and burn them, Deuteronomy 12:3, reflecting the emerging tension between Yahweh's exclusive worship and the older polytheistic traditions. This wasn't just an attack on objects, but an assault on the worldview they represented, a worldview that acknowledged the divine feminine alongside the masculine. The destruction of these poles marked the beginning of Asherah's erasure, as her symbols were systematically purged from sacred spaces and public memory. While temple reforms sought to erase Asherah from public worship, her presence endured in the private lives of ordinary Israelites. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of small figurines depicting a female deity, often with exaggerated features symbolizing fertility and nourishment. These figurines, believed to represent Asherah, were found in homes, kitchens, and shrines across ancient Israel. They served as tangible connections to the goddess, embodying her protective and nurturing qualities. For families, Asherah was not an abstract concept, but a living presence, deeply intertwined with their daily lives. The persistence of these figurines highlights a parallel religious practice, one that existed outside the control of temple authorities. While the centralized worship of Yahweh became the official doctrine, Asherah remained a vital part of household spirituality. Her worship was practical and deeply personal, offering blessings for fertility, health, and prosperity. These figurines stand as silent witnesses to a faith that refused to be extinguished, even as political and religious leaders worked to reshape the narrative. In the private spaces of homes, Asherah's memory endured, a testament to her lasting significance. The reign of King Hezekiah marked a turning point in the campaign against Asherah worship. According to 2 Kings 18:4, Hezekiah removed the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. These actions were part of a broader effort to centralize worship in Jerusalem and establish Yahweh as the sole deity of Israel. For Hezekiah, this wasn't just a matter of faith. It was a political strategy to unify the kingdom under a single religious authority. By eliminating competing symbols of worship, he sought to consolidate power and assert his rule. The reforms targeted not only Asherah poles but also the broader practices associated with her worship. Temples and high places were dismantled, their rituals condemned as idolatry. These actions disrupted centuries-old traditions, forcing a dramatic shift in religious life. Yet the resistance to these reforms suggests that Asherah's worship was deeply entrenched. For many, her presence alongside Yahweh was not heretical but natural, reflecting a balanced vision of the divine. The violent suppression of her worship reveals the depth of the conflict and the lengths to which reformers would go to erase her legacy. King Josiah's reforms, as described in 2 Kings 23, went even further than Hezekiah's efforts. Determined to eliminate all traces of Asherah, Josiah ordered the destruction of sacred sites, the removal of Asherah poles from the temple, and the burning of her symbols. This campaign was unprecedented in its scope and intensity, targeting not just objects but the collective memory of Asherah's worship. Josiah's actions were framed as a purification of Israelite religion, aligning it with the covenantal laws of Yahweh. Yet, this purification came at the cost of an entire theological tradition. The reforms weren't just about faith, they were about control. By centralizing worship in Jerusalem and promoting Yahweh's exclusivity, Josiah reinforced his political authority. The removal of Asherah symbolized a rejection of pluralism and a consolidation of monotheism. Yet, her erasure was not total. Even as her poles were burned and her altars dismantled, her influence persisted in the cultural and spiritual consciousness of the people. Josiah's reforms marked the beginning of her decline, but not the end of her story. Despite the systematic efforts to erase her, traces of Asherah remain in the Bible. The texts often refer to her indirectly, through the condemnation of high places, sacred trees, and poles. For example, Judges 6:25 describes Gideon being commanded to tear down his father's altar to Baal and the Asherah pole beside it. Such passages reveal not only the presence of her worship, but its prominence. These remnants suggest that her role in Israelite religion was significant enough to warrant repeated attention and suppression. Some biblical scholars argue that Asherah's attributes were absorbed into other figures and metaphors in the text. The personification of wisdom in Proverbs 8, described as a female figure who was present at creation, echoes Asherah's nurturing and life-giving qualities. Similarly, the tree of life in the Garden of Eden may carry traces of her symbolism. These subtle references suggest that even as her name was erased, her essence could not be completely removed. The Bible, though edited and revised, still whispers the story of a goddess who once stood at the heart of Israelite faith. The sacred tree is one of the most enduring symbols in ancient religious traditions, and its echoes are unmistakable in the story of the Garden of Eden. The tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil are central to the Genesis narrative, representing divine wisdom, eternal life, and humanity's fall from grace. Scholars have long speculated that these trees may have roots in older traditions, particularly the sacred trees associated with Asherah. Her imagery in ancient Canaanite religion often depicted her as a tree, her branches offering life and sustenance to the world. Could the biblical trees be reimagined symbols of Asherah's legacy, stripped of their direct association with the goddess, but retaining her essence? This connection is further supported by the spiritual significance of trees in Asherah's worship. The Asherah poles mentioned throughout the Bible were not random wooden artifacts. They were living symbols of her divine power. The tree's role in Genesis, both as a source of wisdom and a boundary set by God, aligns with the tension between Yahweh's exclusivity and Asherah's nurturing presence. While the biblical authors sought to erase her from the narrative, the tree's centrality hints at her lingering influence. The tree of life, offering eternal sustenance, and the tree of knowledge, leading to enlightenment and consequence, reflect the dual aspects of Asherah's divine role in ancient cosmology. The prophetic books of the Bible, particularly those of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, bear witness to the fierce campaign against Asherah's worship. These texts condemn idolatry with an almost obsessive intensity, railing against the high places, sacred groves, and rituals associated with other gods. Jeremiah 7:18 is especially telling. The children gather wood, the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead dough to make cakes for the Queen of Heaven. This direct reference to Asherah highlights the persistence of her worship, even in the face of vehement opposition. For the prophets, her presence represented a challenge to the monotheistic vision they sought to impose. Yet the very act of condemnation reveals how entrenched her worship was in Israelite society. The prophet's relentless efforts to suppress Asherah suggest that she was not a marginal figure but a central one. Her title as the Queen of Heaven and the familial involvement in her rituals indicate a deeply rooted tradition that could not be easily dismantled. The prophetic critique, while harsh, inadvertently preserves her memory, providing glimpses into a faith that included the divine feminine. Even as the prophets denounced her, their words attest to her enduring influence and the complexity of Israelite religion. As a goddess of fertility and agriculture, Asherah was deeply connected to the rhythms of nature and the sustenance of life. Her worship was not confined to temples. It extended to the fields and homes of ancient Israel. Farmers prayed to her for abundant harvests, and rituals were performed to ensure the fertility of the land. The sacred poles and groves dedicated to her were often placed near agricultural sites, serving as both spiritual and physical reminders of her role in the cycle of life. This connection to nature made her worship integral to daily survival, particularly in a land as arid and unpredictable as ancient Canaan. The destruction of Asherah poles and sacred groves, as described in the Bible, was not just a theological act, it was an economic and cultural disruption. By severing ties with her worship, reformers sought to centralize control over spiritual and material resources, reinforcing Yahweh's supremacy as the sole provider. Yet, her association with fertility and agriculture could not be entirely erased. The imagery of abundance and life tied to Asherah found echoes in later traditions, from the symbolism of the vine and harvest in Christian theology to the enduring reverence for nature in various spiritual practices. Her legacy, though fragmented, remained a vital thread in the fabric of human spirituality. The Bible's wisdom literature, particularly the book of Proverbs, contains subtle but profound references to the feminine divine. In Proverbs 8, wisdom is personified as a woman who was present at creation, described as a companion to God. I was the craftsman at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence. This portrayal bears striking similarities to Asherah's role as a nurturer and creator in ancient Canaanite religion. Scholars have suggested that this personification of wisdom may be a sanitized echo of Asherah, stripped of her name but retaining her attributes. The association of wisdom with the feminine is not unique to the Bible. It is a recurring theme across ancient cultures. In Jewish mysticism, the concept of the Shekinah, the feminine aspect of God's presence, reflects a similar idea. These parallels suggest that while Asherah was erased from official worship, her influence persisted in subtler forms. Wisdom, as a divine feminine principle, bridges the gap between the suppressed goddess and the evolving theology of monotheism. Her presence in the text, though veiled, serves as a reminder of the balance and inclusivity that once defined the divine in Israelite religion. In Jewish mysticism, the Shekinah emerges as a powerful concept representing the feminine aspect of God's presence. Described as the indwelling spirit of God, the Shekinah embodies compassion, nurturing, and divine wisdom. While distinct from the ancient worship of Asherah, the parallels are striking. Both figures share attributes of protection, guidance, and intimacy with the divine. Some scholars argue that the Shekinah represents a theological adaptation, a way to incorporate the feminine divine into a monotheistic framework without explicitly referencing Asherah. The Shekinah is particularly significant in Kabbalistic traditions, where she is portrayed as the manifestation of God's presence on earth, dwelling among humanity and connecting the spiritual and material realms. This role closely mirrors Asherah's function as a mediator between the divine and human worlds. While the Shekinah does not carry the same fertility associations as Asherah, her emphasis on nurturing and relationality preserves an important aspect of the feminine divine. Through the Shekinah, Asherah's essence continues to influence Jewish spirituality, offering a subtle but profound reminder of the divine feminine's enduring relevance. While Christianity rejected the polytheism of its roots, echoes of Asherah's influence can still be found in Christian symbolism, particularly in the veneration of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Mary's titles, Queen of Heaven, Mother of God, and Mediatrix, parallel Asherah's roles as a divine mother and mediator. The imagery of Mary as a nurturing, protective figure reflects the qualities that Asherah once embodied in ancient Israelite religion. For early Christians, Mary provided a way to honor the feminine divine without contradicting the monotheistic focus on Christ. In addition to Mary, the tree of life imagery in Christian theology resonates with Asherah's sacred tree. In the book of Revelation, the tree of life reappears as a symbol of eternal life and divine healing. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. Revelation 22:2. This imagery recalls Asherah's connection to fertility and sustenance, suggesting that her symbolic legacy persisted even as her name was erased. Through Mary and the Tree of Life, Asherah's influence lives on in new and transformative forms. Archaeological discoveries have played a crucial role in reconstructing Asherah's story. Sites like Kuntillet Ajrud and Khirbet el-Qom provide direct evidence of her worship alongside Yahweh. Inscriptions mentioning Yahweh and his Asherah challenge the traditional narrative of Israelite monotheism, revealing a more complex and inclusive religious landscape. These inscriptions are complemented by figurines, altars, and sacred poles found across ancient Israel, all pointing to her significance in both public and private worship. One of the most compelling discoveries comes from the temple at Arad, where archaeologists found a small sanctuary containing 2 standing stones and a nearby female figurine. These findings suggest that the temple may have honored a divine pair, potentially Yahweh and Asherah. The presence of Asherah's symbols in such a sacred context highlights her integral role in early Israelite religion. Despite centuries of suppression, the archaeological record speaks volumes, offering a tangible connection to a forgotten chapter of faith. These artifacts are a testament to the resilience of Asherah's worship and the enduring impact of her legacy. Asherah was not an isolated figure. Across the ancient Near East, goddesses played central roles in religious life, embodying fertility, wisdom, and cosmic order. In Mesopotamia, Inanna and Ishtar were revered as powerful deities of love and war. In Egypt, Isis was celebrated as a mother and protector, deeply connected to life and magic. These goddesses shared common themes with Asherah, reflecting a widespread recognition of the feminine divine. The parallels suggest that Asherah was part of a larger cultural tapestry, her attributes resonating with universal archetypes of divinity. The Israelites, emerging from this cultural context, initially integrated Asherah into their religious framework. Her roles as a life-giver and mediator complemented Yahweh's attributes, creating a balanced vision of the divine. However, as monotheism took hold, this balance was disrupted. The suppression of Asherah mirrors similar patterns in other traditions where male-dominated religious structures sought to marginalize the feminine divine. Yet, her presence persisted in subtle forms, influencing later religious developments and reminding us of the enduring power of the feminine in spirituality. The Bible is more than a religious text. It is a product of history, shaped by political and theological agendas. The deliberate erasure of Asherah from the narrative reflects the broader struggle to define Israelite identity. Reformers like Josiah sought to establish Yahweh as the sole deity, centralizing worship and consolidating power. This required a rewriting of history, transforming a pluralistic tradition into a strictly monotheistic one. Asherah, once an integral part of the divine order, was rebranded as an idol and erased from public memory. This rewriting was not a passive process, it was a calculated effort to reshape faith and culture. By condemning Asherah and her symbols, the reformers sought to sever ties with the past and establish a new vision of the divine. Yet the fragments that remain in the Bible and the archaeological record tell a different story. They reveal a rich and dynamic faith, one that embraced the feminine and masculine aspects of the divine. The erasure of Asherah is a reminder of how history is often written by the victors, leaving behind echoes of what was lost. The modern rediscovery of Asherah has sparked renewed interest in the divine feminine and its role in ancient spirituality. Scholars, archaeologists, and theologians have pieced together her story, challenging long-held assumptions about Israelite religion. This rediscovery has not only deepened our understanding of the past, but also inspired contemporary movements seeking to reclaim the feminine divine. For many, Asherah represents a lost balance, a vision of spirituality that embraces both nurturing and strength. Books, documentaries, and academic studies have brought Asherah's story to a wider audience, inviting reflection on the complexities of faith and history. Her legacy resonates with those seeking a more inclusive vision of the divine, one that honors the diversity of human experience. Asherah's resurgence is not just about reclaiming a historical figure, it is about reimagining spirituality for a modern world, where the feminine and masculine can coexist in harmony. Asherah's story offers profound lessons about the evolution of faith, the politics of religion, and the resilience of suppressed traditions. Her erasure from Israelite worship reflects a broader pattern in history where competing visions of the divine are often silenced to establish a dominant narrative. By studying Asherah's legacy, we gain insight into the complex dynamics of ancient religion, a world where the sacred was not confined to a single figure, but embraced a plurality that included the divine feminine. Her story reminds us that spirituality is not static, but a living tapestry, shaped by culture, politics, and human longing for connection. Asherah's disappearance from official worship was not the end of her influence. The fragments of her story that survive, in the Bible, in archaeology, and in cultural memory, invite us to reconsider the narratives we have inherited. They challenge us to ask difficult questions about whose voices have been silenced and what we have lost in the pursuit of exclusivity. Asherah's story is not just about the past. It is a call to reclaim a more inclusive understanding of the divine, one that honors the full spectrum of human experience and embraces the balance between masculine and feminine, creation and nurturing, power and compassion. Asherah may have been erased from the official narrative of ancient Israel, but her memory has proven resilient. From archaeological discoveries to modern theological reinterpretations, her story continues to captivate and inspire. She represents a vision of the divine that is expansive and inclusive, rooted in nature and the rhythms of life. Her symbols, sacred trees, wisdom personified, and the nurturing feminine, remain powerful reminders of a time when the sacred was understood as a partnership between the masculine and feminine. Asherah's story is a testament to the enduring power of the divine feminine and its ability to transcend attempts at suppression. Today, Asherah's resurgence reflects a growing recognition of the need for balance in spirituality. Her story challenges us to move beyond rigid frameworks and embrace a vision of faith that honors diversity, creativity, and connection. Whether seen as a historical figure, a symbol, or an archetype, Asherah invites us to reimagine what it means to be sacred. She reminds us that the divine is not limited to one expression, but is as multifaceted as the world it creates. In rediscovering Asherah, we rediscover a part of ourselves, a connection to the past, a challenge to the present, and a hope for the future. Thank you for watching, for being open-minded, and for exploring this topic with me all the way to the end. Please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to turn on the notification bell for more biblical insight.